Hey, Tyson here from Refuge Church in Lenoir City, Tennessee. Thank you for listening to our message today. Refuge Church is a family of faith sent to proclaim hope in Jesus Christ through relationships. For more resources and information about Refuge, please visit us on the web at refugeph.com. We've been in the Old Testament, looking at how the Old Testament points us to Jesus. This week we're going to look at the book of Ruth. It's a book that you may say, I'm not even sure why that book's in there. Well, we're going to see today because it points us to something greater. If you're a visitor with us, you want to follow along, text the word visit to 865-276-8686. You'll be sent a link that you can follow along in our sermon notes. If you're a regular with Refuge, what's important about our sermon notes is there's some announcements in there. Number one is deacon nominations. We're taking deacon nominations through the end of the year. We'll have a business meeting in January to present some people that have been nominated and interviewed and went through the process. So we want you to nominate people, and the way to do that is there. Also, man, the man flu's. I'm on antibiotics, so it's going to go away hopefully eventually. But we've been talking about maybe the kids moving downstairs. Well, we found a place where we can get chairs sooner than we thought. We've ordered chairs. They'll be here in, 3 or 4 weeks. So if we get those chairs in time, we don't run out of chairs, then we will keep the kids up here. That way everybody seems to like that. I know we all do, so that's coming as well. All right, so the book of Ruth. I want you to have in your mind this idea in the book of Ruth, what a kinsman redeemer is. Anytime you hear something like that you've never heard before, just break it down into pieces. Kinsman, somebody related, somebody close to somebody else, and a redeemer. A redeemer, God is our redeemer. Jesus Christ is our redeemer. Somebody who redeems somebody, something pays for something. You redeem a coupon. If you get a coupon, you redeem it. So that's the idea there, is someone close who's paying for something. That's the idea. We live in a world where people no longer value themselves or other people. You can tell by the way people treat other people online, even in person. If you watch online, people treat other people in really bad ways. In school, we know that people treat people in bad ways. We know out in public, people treat people in bad ways. And at the end of the day, people don't value other people. In some respects, people have grown up and they don't even value themselves. Right? People have this thought that maybe, well, my dad checked out when I was little, or my mom checked out when I was little, so nobody cares about me. I have no value. I have no worth. I want to show you today that that's not what God teaches us. I also want us to define what is value. We think of value, we think of a deal, but really the value of something is what it's worth. Now, what determines something's value? Let's say you want to create a whatever, and it takes you $20 to build this little widget, and then you say, okay, I want to make a 20% profit, so I'm going to sell it for $24. Well, if nobody buys it, is that what it's valued at? No. What if somebody's willing to pay $50 for it? Well, then that's what it's worth, right? The value is set by the one who buys it. You may see stuff that somebody says, well, that's on sale, and you're like, I'm not paying that for that. To you, that's not a value. To somebody else, it may be a value. We're living in East Tennessee where everybody in the world wants to move here. And you look at your home value 5 years ago, and then you look at your home value now, and you're like, I probably wouldn't pay that for my house. But we have to, right? Because the value has been set by people who are willing to pay that. What somebody is willing to pay is what determines the value. We're going to see today that no matter what you think about your life or the life of other people, if you don't value other people, we're going to see that God has set a value on what somebody else is worth. We're going to see that today through the book of Ruth. So, to understand the book of Ruth, it's only 4 chapters, and it's a story about Naomi when you read the book of Ruth, because it starts with Naomi and it ends with Naomi. But Ruth is a primary character in the story. But you read this, and it's really about a lady who loses her husband, loses her 2 boys, and her daughter-in-law kind of hangs with her and is faithful. And then there's some weird stuff that goes on at the end about redeeming, and you're like, okay, why is this story in the Bible, but it points us to something greater. But in order to look at the book of Ruth, we got to go backwards from Ruth, and we got to start in Leviticus chapter 25. And what we understand in Leviticus chapter 25 is God set up these sort of rules for the way of nation of Israel to treat each other. See, God valued the nation of Israel. He bought them. He redeemed them from the nation of Egypt. He brought them out. He freed them from their slavery, and He values them, and He wants them to value each other. So He sets up this idea of a redeemer. So we're going to look at it in Leviticus chapter 25, starting in verse 47. This is what it says. It says, if a stranger or sojourner with you becomes rich, and your brother beside him becomes poor and sells himself to the stranger or sojourner with you, or to a member of a stranger's clan. Now let me stop there. The idea here is that a stranger or sojourner is a foreigner, non-Israelite, a Gentile. But this idea of your brother is a fellow countryman. Right? This is a Jew. So he's making a distinction. It says, with you or to a member of your stranger's clan, and after he is sold, he may be redeemed. One of his brothers may redeem him. So even though sometimes people get in a situation where they couldn't take care of their family financially, so they would hire themselves out like an indentured servant to somebody else, and sometimes that other person was a foreigner. But the laws of that time that God had created is that an Israelite always has the opportunity to redeem his fellow countryman, his fellow brother, if you will. But he goes on, right? He ends with this idea of one of his brothers may redeem him, verse 49, or his uncle or his cousin may redeem him, or a close relative from his clan may redeem him. Now, this idea of clan is sort of these 12 tribes of Judah, the 12 sons of Jacob. And then they're broken down into clans, so they're part of this whole lineage that God had set up. So this is the idea that this is a fellow kinsman, if you will, somebody related. That's the idea of where this comes from, a kinsman redeemer. So if somebody hires themselves out, they owe a debt that they can't pay, these Israelites can redeem them. They can get their land back. The idea is this is Israelites' land. This is the land that God gave them, and they have the first right of refusal, if you will, to that land. So this is what He set up. Jump down to verse 55. He says, "For it is to me that the people of Israel are servants. They're my servants, whom I brought out of the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God." He's saying, listen, I've already redeemed you. I've already brought you out of Egypt. I've given you this land. You're to serve me, not to serve other people. And that's the idea behind this idea of a kinsman redeemer. So then, let's begin to focus on this idea of the book of Ruth. You can turn over to the book of Ruth. We're going to start in chapter 1. I was going to paraphrase a lot of this, but I'm not a good paraphrase guy, so I'm going to read a lot of it. I will paraphrase just part of it. But here's the idea. The story opens with Naomi and Elimelech, who are married. And there becomes a famine in the land. They've run out of food. So they have to do whatever they have to do to survive. So they go to the land of Moab. Now, if you study biblical history, you understand that Moab is not the greatest of friends with the nation of Israel. Matter of fact, when God brought them out of Egypt, the nation of Moab had the opportunity to help Israel with food and water, and they chose not to. So God cursed them for 10 generations. So to go to somebody, to go to the land of Moab would be like the prodigal son who went and fed pigs. You get the idea? He's going to the enemy territory, enemies of the Jews. But that's what they had to do to survive. So Naomi and Elimelech and their 2 sons go to Moab, and Elimelech dies. So now it's Naomi and her 2 sons. And about 10 years later, her 2 sons get married to Moabite women. So they've married the enemy. They've married this nation that God has cursed for those 10 years. Now, these 2 women had nothing to do with what they did back when they brought them out of Egypt. Neither did Elimelech and Naomi's sons, but that's where we are. So then, Naomi's 2 sons pass away. So now Naomi is left with 2 daughter-in-laws who, oh, by the way, they're Moabite women, right? Looked down upon. And so what are they going to do? They're living in a time when a woman couldn't just go out and get a job. They couldn't provide for themselves. They're literally at the mercy of other people. Now, God set up some laws for that in His country, in the nation of Israel, and we're going to see that. So they're basically beggars. So that's where we're going to pick up the story in Ruth chapter 1, verse 6. Then she, Naomi, arose with her daughters-in-law, to return from the country of Moab, for she had heard in the fields of Moab that the Lord had visited His people and had given them food. So the famine is over back home. Naomi says, okay, it's time to go back home. Verse 7. So she set out from the place where she was with her 2 daughters-in-law, and they went on the way to return to the land of Judah. But Naomi said to her 2 daughter-in-laws, go, return each of you to your mother's house. May the Lord deal kindly with you as you have dealt with the dead and with me. The Lord grant you that you may find rest, each of you, in your house, in the house of your husband. Now remember, I said this last week, when we see the word rest in the Old Testament, it now sort of means something different to us, right? It doesn't just mean, hey, they're going to go take a nap. Rest is the idea that they don't have to work or earn. So sometimes we relay that to salvation. They don't have to work or earn salvation. That's what the Sabbath points us to. But what he's pointing to is that they're going to find salvation in their husband and in providing for that. That's the idea of find rest. It says, then she kissed them, and they lifted up their voices and wept. And they said to her, no, we will return to you with your people. But Naomi said, turn back, my daughters. Why will you go with me? Have I yet sons in my womb that they may become your husbands? Turn back, my daughters, go your way, for I am too old to have a husband. If I should say I have hope, even if I should have a husband this night and should bear sons, would you therefore wait till they are grown? Would you therefore refrain from marrying? He said, no, my daughters, for it is exceedingly bitter to me for your sake that the hand of the Lord has gone out against me. So here we're seeing a little bit of a glimpse into Naomi's mindset, is that she feels like that God is punishing her. She's lost her husband. She's lost her 2 sons. This was a common thought throughout the day. Matter of fact, when she goes back to the nation of Israel, people are going to honestly assume that she has done something wrong, that's the reason God has punished them. That was the idea of the day. We see that in Jesus' time when He's in the New Testament and He heals the blind and He heals those who are crippled. The idea is that those people who are blind and crippled, either they or their parents did something against God, therefore God is punishing them. That was the idea. Now that's not true, but that was the idea. Naomi has that same mindset. Verse 14. It says, then they lifted up their voices and wept again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law, but Ruth clung to her. So Orpah goes back home to Moab. She goes back to her clan, but Ruth is hanging on. We're introduced to Ruth here, verse 15. It says, and she said, Naomi said, see, your sister-in-law has gone back to her people and to her gods. Return after your sister-in-law. But Ruth said, do not urge me to leave you or to return from following you, for where you go, I will go. Where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people shall be my people, and your God shall be my God. Now here's the thing. Despite Naomi's mindset that God was punishing her, obviously Ruth saw something in the life of her and maybe Elimelech and her 2 sons that made her want to trust Naomi's God. And she says, no, I want your God to be my God. I want your people to be my people. So let's read on, verse 17. It says, where you die, I will die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do so to me, and more also, if anything but death parts me from you. And when Naomi saw that she was determined to go with her, she said no more. Now here's the thing. Ruth being very faithful to Naomi, Naomi has a decision to make. She's going to go back home, and you know what they're going to say about Naomi when she gets back home? There's poor Naomi. I don't know what her and her husband did, but man, God's really judging them. And now she's brought that Moabite lady back with her. You know, you can hear the gossip mill already starting, and we're going to see it. So Naomi has a decision to make, but she lets Ruth come back. Verse 19. So the 2 of them went on until they came to Bethlehem. And when they came to Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them. And the women said, "Is this Naomi?" You see, the gossip mill's already started. We know about the gossip mill, right? We're a growing town, but we're still a small town, right? If there's a fire, we want to know where it's at, whose house is it. We want to be dialed in to what's going on the gossip. And obviously that's true here. Here's Naomi, she's left, and all she's brought back is this Moabite woman. Verse 20, she said to them, "Do not call me Naomi, call me Mara, for the Almighty has dealt very bitterly with me. I went away full, and the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi when the Lord has testified against me, and the Almighty has brought calamity upon me?" So Naomi returned, and Ruth the Moabite, by the way, every time they mention Ruth, they throw in that she's a Moabite. Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law with her, who returned from the country of Moab, and they came to Bethlehem at the beginning of the barley harvest. So here we go. Naomi's back, but the rumor mill started. But we've still got this idea of a kinsman redeemer that's hanging out there, and we're introduced to this man named Boaz. Boaz is a relative of the clan of Elimelech. He would be considered a redeemer. So she happens to come up to decide that they're going to go out and glean in the field. You'll see that in the Bible sometimes, that gleaning in the field. Well, God set up these laws for people who are poor, and He told people who had fields, don't harvest right up to the edge, and if you drop some, don't bend over and pick it up. Leave it, and the poor will come and glean from it. So Ruth and Naomi were basically resorted to gleaning for survival. So Ruth is out gleaning, and she happens to come across the field of a man named Boaz. And Boaz sees her and asks who it is and puts a protection on her, and they sort of give her some extra food, and he provides protection and water and some other food for her. Look at Ruth chapter 2, verse 12. It says, "The Lord repay you." This is what Boaz said to her. "The Lord repay you for what you have done, and a full reward be given to you by the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." Remember what Ruth said to Naomi? "I want your God to be my God." And see, ultimately what Ruth is looking for is a place of refuge, a place of rest, a place to find value. Now, she's in the nation of Israel, who, by the way, the nation of Israel looks at a Moabite woman and they see no value whatsoever. Right? That's the place where she finds herself. But that's not who God is. Right? Even though she's an outcast. So Naomi goes back, or Ruth goes back to Naomi. Look at verse 20. It says, "And Naomi said to her daughter-in-law, may he be blessed," that's Boaz, "by the Lord, whose kindness has not forsaken the living or the dead." Naomi also said to her, "The man is close relative of ours, one of our redeemers." So Naomi now knows that Boaz could be a kinsman redeemer. Chapter 3, verse 1, it says, "Then Naomi, her mother-in-law, said to her, my daughter, should I not seek rest for you, that it may be well with you?" Again, she's wanting to find her rest. She's wanting to find her refuge. She's wanting to find her salvation. So Naomi tells Ruth to go find Boaz after the harvest party at night and find him. So she goes and finds him and lays at his feet, which is sort of a sign of submission. So we're going to pick it up in chapter 3, verse 9. I know this is sort of a long story, but it says in chapter 3, verse 9, it says, "He said, 'Who are you?' And she answered, 'I am Ruth, your servant. Spread your wings over your servant, for you are a redeemer.'" So she basically goes to Boaz and says, "Would you redeem me? Would you be willing?" Now here's the thing about a redeemer, and we're going to see this in just a second. He's going to have to pay for the land of Elimelech. He's going to have to pay Naomi. That's part of the redemption process. Whoever Naomi lost her land to, he's got to go redeem it. So there's a cost that he has to pay for Naomi and Elimelech's land. But then there's this idea of Ruth. He has to do something with her as well. So not only does a redeemer have to be willing, but he has to be able. Now Boaz is able. He has the money. He is able. But is he willing? That's the key. So pick it up in verse 10. It says, "And he said, May you be blessed by the Lord, my daughter. You have made this last kindness greater than the first, in that you have not gone after young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. I will do for you all that you ask, for all my fellow townsmen know that you are a worthy woman. Verse 12, it says, Now, it is true that I am a redeemer, yet there is a redeemer nearer than I. Remain tonight, and in the morning, if he will redeem you, good, let him do it. But if he is not willing to redeem you, then as the Lord lives, I will redeem you. Lie down until morning. So there's somebody that has the first right of refusal that's closer to Elimelech's family than Boaz. So Boaz goes to this man. We pick it up in chapter 4, verse 3. It says, Then he said to the Redeemer, Naomi has come back from the country of Moab, is selling a parcel of land that belonged to our relative Elimelech. So I thought I would tell you of it and say, Buy it in the presence of those sitting here and in the presence of the elders of my people. If you will redeem it, redeem it. But if you will not, tell me that I may know, for there is no one besides you to redeem it, and I come after you. And he said, I will redeem it. So this guy's like, I'm in. I'll take this land that is Naomi's. I'm willing to pay the price. But Boaz hadn't told him the full story. So now Boaz gives him the, oh, wait, there's more speech. And this is what he says in verse 5. Then Boaz said, oh yeah, by the way, the day you buy the field from the hand of Naomi, you also acquire Ruth the Moabite, the widow of the dead, in order to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance. And then the Redeemer said, I cannot redeem it for myself, lest I impair my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, for I cannot redeem it. So here's a man who could have been the kinsman redeemer. He was able, but he was not willing. He would have taken the land. The problem was this Moabite lady. He didn't want to have anything to do with her. She would have tarnished his reputation. She would have gave his family a bad name, and he wasn't willing to do it. But here's what's interesting about this. See, here's the idea of value. This man looked at Naomi and he looked at Ruth and he said, okay, there's a value to the land, but I'm not willing to pay that for her. If she's part of the deal, I'm not willing to pay it. And listen, we're in a country where people feel this way all the time. And people don't feel that they're worthy. The internet uses people for money. People sell themselves on the internet for a price, and it's cheap. Because people don't feel that they're valued, because that's all they think somebody is willing to pay. And here we have this man who says, listen, I'm not willing to pay it. Look at verse 9. Then Boaz said to the elders and all the people, you are witnesses this day that I have bought from the hand of Naomi all that belonged to Elimelech and all that belonged to Chilion and Mahlon. That's the two sons. Also Ruth the Moabite, the widow of Mahlon, I have bought to be my wife, to perpetuate the name of the dead in his inheritance, that the name of the dead may not be cut off from among the brothers and from the gate of his native place. You are witnesses this day. Then all the people who were at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman, that's Ruth, who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, two of the most highly prized women in Jewish society. They're saying, listen, would you make her like them? And oh, by the way, she is. Read Matthew chapter 1 in the lineage to Jesus. Ruth is there. We're going to see in just a moment. It says, may you act worthily in whatever that word is and be renowned in Bethlehem. And may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore to Judah, because of the offspring of the Lord will give you by this young woman. Look at verse 14. It says, then the woman said to Naomi. So now Naomi and Ruth has a child with Boaz. And we pick it up, and now Naomi, again, the story ends with her. It says, the woman said to Naomi, blessed be the Lord who has not left you this day without a redeemer, and may his name be renowned in Israel. Verse 15, he shall be to you a restorer of life and a nourisher of your old age. For your daughter-in-law who loves you, who is more to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. And Naomi took the child and lay him on her lap, and she became a nurse. Remember, she said, I left full and I came back empty. And God has given her a grandchild. Rodney and Don will tell you that a grandchild's greater than a child, right? They're the favorite. That's the idea. It says, and the woman of the neighborhood gave him a name, saying, a son has been born to Naomi. They named him Obed. He was the father of Jesse, the father of David, King David. And you see, here's the thing about this story. We had one man who was able but not willing. We had another man, Boaz, who was not only able, but he was willing. He was willing to pay the price. Not only the monetary price, but he was willing to take the damage to his own reputation. He was willing to be cursed, if you will, to be able to redeem Naomi and Ruth. And see, that's the idea. So how does that point us to Jesus? I'm going to ask Jah, you want to come on up here and get started? I'm going to finish in Galatians chapter 3. Galatians chapter 3, verse 13. This is why Jesus came as a little baby. Emmanuel, God with us. He came in human form, as Philippians says, to be like us. Why? Because He's our kinsman redeemer. He had to be close to us. He had to be like us. And He had to be able, and He had to be willing. Look at Galatians chapter 13, or chapter 3, verse 13. It says, Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. For it is written, cursed is everyone who is hanged on a tree, so that in Christ Jesus the blessing of Abraham might come to the Gentiles, so that we might receive the promised Spirit through faith. Here's the thing about Jesus Christ and God. What was God willing to pay? He was willing to curse His own Son. This is part of why the Jews missed Jesus. There's no way that the Savior of the Israelites could be cursed. No way God could be cursed by being hung on a tree. But that's exactly what He did. Why? Because that's exactly what we needed. That's the payment that needed to be made for us. We are cursed. And He took that curse on Himself. Our bad reputation, our sin, all that we've done, He took on Himself and said, I'm willing to pay it because you're worth it. And see, this gives us value when we look at our own life. Whether your mom or dad checked out on you as a little kid and you're like, nobody cares for me. Listen, God is willing to send His own Son to die for you. That's how much He cares for you. That's how much He's willing to pay. And when we go out on the streets and we see people and we know that they don't think that they have any value, we know that God cares for them and gives them value. Why? Because the price He was willing to pay. We have a kinsman redeemer, one who lived like us in that He fought the same battles that we fought. He fought the same temptation that we fought. But He did it perfectly. And then He died in our place and took our sin upon Him. Would you pray with me? God, we come to You today, God, just so thankful that You sent a kinsman redeemer. One who is like us in every way, except He lived perfectly. But He became the curse that we should have taken on for us. God, what You're willing to pay for us is unimaginable. And it sets our value, not what the world says about us or anybody else. God, You mean more than all those people, and You set the value of what we're worth, and You're willing to give it all. And God, I pray that people today understand their value, that You love them and that You care for them. I pray that we're a church that we tell other people how much God cares about them and loves them. Tonight, in this room and in this parking lot, there will be hundreds of people from our community. And God, I pray that we show them that You care for them and that You love them. That tonight's not just about giving out candy. It's telling people that God loves them, that You love them, and that You cared for them, and that You died for them. Help us to be people that do that. And God, if there's somebody here who maybe their parents have checked out and they don't feel like that anybody cares about them, God, I pray that You show them that You love them more than anything. That they understand what Jesus did for them. They accept You today in Jesus' name. Thank you for listening to this message today brought to you by Refuge Church. Please visit our website for more resources as well as our YouTube channel. Just search for Refuge Church in Lenoir City, Tennessee to find us. We hope that this message has helped you find hope in Jesus Christ.